Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and today, well, I shouldn't say I'm up early because I'm always up early, but this is probably the earliest Instagram live that we've ever done because our guest is in the UK. It's Coach Elizabeth Shaw, and there she is. And let me let her in. A lively conversation a few months ago, and there were so many things to talk about, and there you are. Hi, you did it. I turned off my Wi-Fi just to be safe, so hopefully we'll stay unpixelated.
Are we unpixelated now?
Yeah.
Being clear.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming on. You want to quickly introduce yourself to anyone who might not already know who you are?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Elizabeth Shaw, and I tend to discuss a lot of things about narcissism. I needed to do it at this time because I do have 5 children, so trying to get on a live with children around does not work.
I really thought you were like 32, and I'm thinking, how does she have 5? Unless you are 32 and you have 5. But amazing. I couldn't believe you have 5 children. But thank you so much for taking time out of the crazy busy parenting to do this.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Now they're all at school and work, so that's fine.
Okay, good. All right, so we talked about how our topic is going to be well, a number of topics, but the main thing is the audience, how the narcissist needs an audience. And part of the audience is like this, they create this reality that doesn't really exist that involves a lot of lying. And one of the things we talked about is the idea of lying and delusion. Like if somebody thinks that what they're saying is true, is that actually lying? Do narcissists actually believe the lies in your experience?
That depends on the narcissist that you're dealing with.
Okay.
So I think with some, they live so many different lives that they tell different pockets of people different stories about themselves, and if they're not that good at lying, they get caught out in the stories that they're selling to those around them, which is why then they jump on the defense mechanism and gaslight everybody. I think with others, they convince themselves, they almost morph into that character and that role, that they convince themselves that that is their reality. So that's their belief to them. So some will most definitely know that they're lying, and others, I'd say not. And that's why when you're trying to kind of explain to them that you know that they're lying, it's not computing within the mind. They don't seem to understand it, because to them that is their belief and that's the reality that they lived. So
why do you think some people have that? Like, do you know how that develops? Why are some people pathological liars or compartmentalized? I see that someone put a comment about that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of research on that, so it's again mostly theories. With some people, it will be sort of a protective mechanism from possibly early childhood. However, there's plenty of people who have traumatic childhoods that don't then go to that protective mechanism of just outright lying to people. I do believe with some, it's a game. They get that little kick out of getting one over on people and getting away with it, and people not realizing what they're really up to. So again, there's lots of different theories as to why they might end up like that. Yeah, I still believe that it is a choice that they make initially, and then they kind of continue along that choice to the point where they begin to believe their own lies. So to them, it is their truth.
Yeah, and that's why it's really not worth arguing. And I've made the mistake myself for a long time in the past, like arguing to show them that that's not reality.
There's no
And yet
point.
we feel compelled to try to explain how they're delusional, and look at this and look at the evidence I have and everything. And is that common in your world too?
Yes. And again, if they know what they're doing, then they don't want you to recognize that that's what they're doing. So they're going to gaslight you. If they actually believe that what they're saying is true, then they're going to stand in what they believe to be their truth. We can all go to like a sporting event and have a different perception of what's happened. So even non-narcissistic people can come across somebody who just says, hey, it happened like this, and their memory of that event is different. So they themselves can then go, no, it didn't. It was more like this. And it's just more with genuine people, you kind of then think, oh, was it like that? And then you're willing to listen to the other person. Whereas with a narcissistic person, it's their way and you're wrong, and they're going to drive you crazy trying to prove that you're right in what happened, even
Yeah,
if
I
you have got
mean,
that evidence.
and that's the thing, is they sometimes seem so steadfast in the reality that we think that ours is wrong.
Yeah, we question our perception, and they continue to claim that they are right. And like you say, even if you've got evidence to prove otherwise, they're just going to go and find a way to accuse you of something or blame you for something so that they can distract from what they've done.
Right. And even when you show them the evidence, they'll flip it to like twist it so that somehow you're wrong no matter what.
And if that doesn't work, they'll usually then start attacking you or accusing you of attacking them in some way, especially if they can accuse you in attacking them in a discriminative sort of way, so that then they can play the victim with everybody else, and what they did, even with that evidence, is swept under the carpet and they get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of one of the most common things is somebody's caught cheating and there's evidence in their phone, and say, I find the evidence, and then I get screamed at and told that I am nosy and snoopy and terrible, and how could I be so untrusting? So it's deflected from the actual act that the other person did, which was wrong, and their betrayal, and it turns into, how dare I have looked at the phone?
And the thing is, often we might not have even, if we have snooped through their phone to find the evidence, we kind of know that perhaps we shouldn't have done that. So then when they turn and accuse us of going through their things and it's wrong, we feel bad because we know we shouldn't have done that. Yeah, even if you've just sort of found an open letter or found lipstick in a car or found something, and you didn't go snooping, they're still going to accuse you of the one who's gone snooping. Some will even threaten to phone the police for going through their things if needed, to put that fear into you that, oh, I've done something wrong here, when actually, no, you lied, you cheated, and you just don't want to take responsibility for it, because in their mind, they just feel like they're entitled to do that, and you're in the wrong. You've turned against them by not allowing them to just do as they please.
Exactly. And the thing that you said about feeling like you've done something wrong, that seems to be the theme of a lot of clients we have. No matter what the other person's done, they're questioning themselves and they're thinking, maybe I'm the one that's toxic. Maybe I'm the narcissist. Do you see that a lot also?
Yes. And I know in the beginning of my journey, that's how I started, because I was like, I know how bad I can be. I know what I can do. I know, so maybe it is me, maybe, and that is how the majority of people end up feeling around a narcissistic person, that they're at fault for everything that went wrong.
Right, which is exactly how the narcissist wants you to feel.
Yes, because then you tend to end up working harder to please the narcissist and make it up to the narcissist, because you don't want them feeling bad, because you feel like you're the one that's caused everything, which
Right.
they want to turn around and say it's all your fault. And when it's done to you over a prolonged period of time, it kind of conditions your mind into thinking like that. Those subtle words that they just constantly chip away at us, when they do turn around and say it's your fault or you ruin everything. But it's not just a one-off. We can all say things as a one-off. They repeatedly say it to you to the point where you second guess yourself and question yourself.
Yeah, and that's how people become a shell of themselves.
Yeah, and often too afraid to speak out because they think they're the problem. And the narcissist is usually smearing the name, and they haven't got anyone to talk to anymore. Because we can all feel ashamed. However, narcissistic people go all out to blame everybody else so that they can be the victim in it all and gain the attention.
Yeah, I was going to say they genuinely seem to believe that other people are all the toxic ones and not them. And they go around the world like that.
Yep. And that's why they tend to never actually get anywhere in life. You're freezing. Am I doing the same to you?
Yeah, so are you. I'm like, you're pixelating, but I can still hear you, so keep talking.
Yeah, I think because they believe that the story then in turn in their mind becomes that they are the genuine victim. So it's going back into that delusional mindset. So because they constantly go around blaming everybody else and failing to take responsibility, failing to be able to be responsible for their own actions, they don't change their actions. They just continue going around blaming and shaming everybody else, scapegoating everybody else. And you'll often find with some narcissistic people, they can sit there scratching their own head thinking, why is everybody out to get me? Why does nobody do things for me? Because it is all about them. It is that me, myself, and I with a narcissistic person. So they don't change as such. I know they change to manipulate, but they don't change for the better for themselves because they're too busy blaming everybody else. Whereas with a victim, you'll often notice because they do blame themselves for things that aren't even their fault, they tend to learn a lot more from the experience, and after the experience do a lot better as long as they work on themselves. No one should have to go through that. However, because they are willing to take responsibility, they're able to change.
Yeah. And for a narcissist, things are working just fine for them.
Until
they're not doing anything wrong, so why should they change?
Ruined it all for them. Even though it's kind of their projection in some way, because they are actually the ones that come along and ruin everything for you. They financially abuse you. They take all your friends and family away, yet they plant those seeds in your mind that you think you're the one that's actually done it to them. Only they genuinely believe you've done it to them, and you're the one left questioning, oh, was it me?
I know, it's mind-boggling because it's so irrational, and we go through the world thinking that it's rational and logical, and it doesn't make sense to us and to anyone around us who's never dealt with it. And I was going to say what you mentioned before, that narcissists tend to get a high from other people's pain and suffering. What do you see? Like, how do you know that it makes them happy?
One that I have been lucky or unlucky enough to observe, it's often down to their envy, usually because they're envious of other people. They don't like seeing other people do well. They don't like seeing other people achieve things. They don't like seeing other people happy. They kind of, in some sense, believe that you've stolen that happiness from them in some way, or that you don't deserve it, they deserve it. You'll often find with narcissistic parents, they don't want their children to do any better than themselves unless they can take the credit for it. So when they see somebody else suffering, it helps them feel better, which is a sick way of looking at things. But to a narcissistic person, it's a case of, now they know what it's like. Now they know what I've had to go through, because they're comparing their suffering and their misery to yours, but theirs has to be worse than yours. So they've always got to put everyone else down. And once they have pulled everyone else down, it gives them that kind of smugness of, see, they're no better than me. See, they're just like me. So on that kind of level of thinking, in some aspects, they must be able to recognize what they're doing to then be able to think, see, they're no better than I am. Yet we're all humans, so we all make mistakes. It's just genuine people take responsibility and don't do it again. They're remorseful, they feel that guilt. Whereas with narcissistic people, they don't tend to feel that guilt. They might feel that moment of shame that they've been caught out in something, which is why they just shift the blame straight over to you or somebody else so that they don't have to take responsibility for it. It's not their fault, it's not their doing. So they do enjoy seeing other people suffer, because seeing other people happy gets that envy in them. And we all know what it's like when you can just see something and think, wow, I wish I could have that, I wish I could go there. We all have that kind of jealousy within us. However, with our jealousy, we can think, good for them. I'm glad they're doing that. How can I do that? How can I achieve that for myself? Whereas with a narcissistic person, they kind of think, how did you get that? You've taken that from me. You don't deserve that. How can I get one over on you? How can I take that away from you? How can I take it away from you for myself or destroy it for you? Because if I can't have it, nobody's having it. And as soon as they have destroyed it for you, they feel smug then because they're in control. So it's usually down to their envy.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. And as you're talking, I'm thinking that it sounds like narcissists are very competitive.
Yes.
You think that's a good word to describe? Like the envy comes in because everything is a competition. I have to feel the worst. I have to be the best. Nobody else deserves anything. And they always have to win.
Yeah, and they always have to win at all costs to you because they lack the empathy to care for how their behaviour is negatively impacting you. They'll create the competition to stand back and watch the show and feel happy, which is often why narcissistic parents will end up having a scapegoat and a golden child, and the roles can be reversed because the parent is playing the children off against each other and creating that competition. However, that competition that they create within their children also creates that doubt within their children, and that, for the scapegoat example, being compared to the golden child, the scapegoat child's forever questioning whether they're enough, whether they're capable, what's wrong with them. And again, they're having their minds conditioned from a very early age to think that there is something wrong with them, and almost being trained up for narcissistic partners later in life because they're forever trying to please. And it's the same for the golden child. It's no better or worse for either, because the golden child is learning how to please other people and be there for other people and make other people happy. That they don't recognize that some people are exploitative and manipulative.
Yeah, yeah. We talked a lot about how narcissists can morph into these roles and how they do exploit people. And you had a story about a homeless person. You want to talk about that? How they just find these characters to become?
They're not so homeless person. And this is also, I will talk about the homeless person, but this is also why the narcissist will tend to have at least one person who knows the truth about the narcissist, but they can't speak out for fear of what will happen, for fear of the consequences if they speak out against the narcissist. And also, the narcissist is usually living that many different lives and telling people different stories that if they do speak out, they're not believed. As we all know, we're not believed. So with a narcissistic person who is rather wealthy, who is rather bored, so then goes out and pretends to be homeless in order to exploit people for free food, for free clothing. A narcissistic person that if anyone had anything designer, if anyone was wearing any designer clothing, they would pull that designer clothing to shreds. So what would you want to wear that for? What would you want to waste your money on that for? However, pretending to be a homeless person and going into a charity and then being able to steal the clothes with labels and then come home and say, oh, look what I've got. And then all of a sudden these labels are no longer an issue because they've got the labels.
Double standard.
They'll go to the charity, pretend to be homeless, get all the free food, get all the free clothing, and then they will play the victim with the charity that their family are grown up and they don't want to be a burden to their family, and their family have got no interest, and they'd rather let their family live their own lives, and their children don't appreciate them, and they haven't got a wife or a husband or anything. So they're gaining that sympathetic attention. So they're getting people to buy them things and give them things and give them free food. Yet to the neighbours, they'll be selling the story to the neighbours of how they're helping out at this charity, how they're what I usually describe as the compassionate narcissist, the one that's acting virtuous and morally superior, and how they're giving up all their free time to help out at this charity, not realising that they're actually exploiting this charity for their own gains, to the point where they could perhaps be invited out to a family meal, yet because they might have to put their hand in the pocket, the tightwad narcissist, because they might have to then pay out, they'd rather ditch their family and go and have a free meal at the charity while claiming that their family wants nothing to do with them. So if their family was to potentially head to the charity and try and explain, due to the story the narcissist has sold and how they've acted and dressed and everything else, the family's not going to get believed. So you're stuck in that, between that rock and hard place, where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, via a third party. And they go all out to exploit the charities to get their need met, and they can feel smug about this. Now, I do think in some cases it can get to them, and they can sort of get to a point where, because they've morphed into that role, they start to forget what role they're playing. Back to the beginning, when they're selling these stories, sometimes they can then get muddled up, which is why then they have to try and gaslight people to rectify their own situation that they've put themselves in. And a narcissist that does this can even then head to the doctors to complain that they're stressed because they're helping out at this charity so much, to again gain more sympathetic attention. And if the doctor was to advise that perhaps you need to no longer help out quite so much and take a break and you don't have to, you're volunteering, the narcissist will turn around and say, oh, I can't do that. They need me. Where would they be without me? To make themselves feel so. And in their head, they actually think, oh, I can't do that. But they can't do that because they need to go and steal from the charity. They need to go and get their kicks, their fix. It's their drug in a way to get what they want.
And also to fool people. It's almost like, I'm so smart. Look at everyone that I fooled. Like we deal a lot with the family court system and legal abuse, and we always say that the court is a stage, because it's like, I could fool a narcissist, can possibly lie. And if I fool a judge, how amazing am I? And I beat the other person in court. I am such a winner.
It is a stage, and the best possible way I found to be a narcissistic person is in a courtroom. Like, the best way to beat them in general is don't play. The more you don't acknowledge them and don't communicate with them and don't give them any attention and don't bite back when they're saying stuff about you, it's very normal to get emotionally reactive and say, I didn't say that, I didn't do that, and then you're the one that's interrupted the court proceedings. Whereas if you just sit there and let them say and direct your answers to the judge, and the narcissist isn't getting their desired attention, they are then the ones that are most likely to rage out at the core. As soon as the judge doesn't believe them on something or criticizes them on something, they will then, more often than not, expose themselves.
Yep. Definitely have seen that. But let's go back to when you talked about, sorry, what, Elizabeth?
It's good to watch, actually, when they finally get, we are human, we're allowed to be pleased sometimes.
That's right. So you were talking about charitable institutions, and I was thinking that in our world, we also see narcissists not just involved with a lot of charitable institutions, but forming them, being the heads of them, and also in communities, being the heads of churches and very noble organizations. Do you see things like that? Because it just fits right into, I'm so wonderful, I'm so pious, no one can even question me, because this is what I do.
Yeah, I did a YouTube video last week on the scapegoat in the community, which a lot of people, I don't think fully, there was one that was saying, you talking about community. However, that's what I was meaning. In each culture and community and religion and everything else, there tends to be that 1% of narcissistic people, maybe less, maybe more, but there's just that small percentage of narcissistic people that are grandiose enough to sort of speak for the rest of them. And then they give the rest of them a bad name. You get that sort of stigma attached. And then anyone within that community that dares to stand up and say, hang on a minute, this isn't us, this isn't what we're about, you're actually giving us a bad name, they then scapegoat that person out of the community. And because of the stigma they've caused, people in other communities don't genuinely accept them in because they're concerned that they're like the narcissistic type. And then you find that people daren't stand up to them because they don't want to be scapegoated. And it is within charities and religions and beliefs and cultures and all walks of life. There's just that small percentage of narcissistic people that just know how to twist things to their advantage. If someone from outside the community tries to explain to them or tries to get people to say, hey, this is a manipulative narcissist you're dealing with here, they just turn around and accuse you of discriminating against that community, discriminating against that religion, attacking them. However, more often than not, you'll often find that they will then accuse you of attacking them, but then they'll threaten you in some way to try and shut you down or try and threaten your family. But that's okay because you called them out, and they're the one that are throwing the threats around, and people don't want to stand up to them because they don't want their families, rightly so, they don't want their families in danger or being threatened. So they continue to work up the hierarchy and ruin those communities, ruin those religions.
Yeah, and I was thinking also the people that are scapegoated or ostracized from the community, they've often been smeared to the public and they feel like there's nowhere to go, and that's why people are so afraid too, because they're thinking, if I'm kicked out of this community, I have nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So
no home, no. It's the same in, you can have it in careers as well. I know vaccines is a very controversial topic and I don't particularly want to get into it, but you can have it if someone in that sort of field, if a doctor or some medical professional in that field notices something that doesn't seem to sit right and then wants to go ahead and do the research, however, somebody else in that field doesn't want that coming to light, that one that tries to speak up is going to be scapegoated and outed. And not only do they lose their potential homes and things like that, they will lose their career. They'll make sure that they can't work in that field again. So it's very hard, even if they're not necessarily saying, hey, I can see this happening, it's definitely this. They might not even be going along those lines. They might just be, oh, there's a pattern that I've recognized, I just want to make sure it's not, or it is. So they themselves might not be dead set on, oh, this has caused this. They can just simply be, it's a pattern, let's explore it, let's do some research and see. And someone else will want it shutting down, they get scapegoated out, they lose their career, they lose their home, they lose the faith in those around them, and they end up with their life in ruins.
Yeah, I'm thinking of just the concept of coercive control, which is to prevent conflict. So one person has all the authority and makes all the decisions, and everyone else has to stay quiet. So they're not allowed to question.
And if you do question, then you're the one that gets accused of creating the conflict and the controversy. And so it's quite hard because you don't really want to create the controversy, but then you want to say, hey, something doesn't quite sit right here. And they're not going to let you, a narcissistic person is going to go all out to scapegoat you. So you can't, and then they're going to accuse you of being the one that's creating the drama.
Right, right. So it's really, really tricky. I was going to say, we talked a little bit about how they have these inappropriate responses where if someone has something, someone has an achievement or something good happened to them, a narcissist wants to cut them down because of the envy that they have. And you also have, you and I had talked about their responses to other people's tragedies. You want to talk a little bit about that? Instead of like the how can I help this person, like if they see something or they hear something horrible happen, what's their response instead?
If they see something horrible happen to another person, usually again due to their envy, they're quite pleased that the other person is suffering in some way. They don't feel a need to help out. They lack the empathy. So you can be sat watching something on television about starving children, and to them it doesn't compute within their mind. It's out of sight, out of mind. They're not really that bothered. You can have a narcissistic person watching a TV program about transplants, for example, and you can just strike up a conversation with them and say, oh, if that was my grandson, I'd give them one of my kidneys. And the narcissistic person would be like, what would you want to do that for? I wouldn't do that. Right? There's nothing there. They don't understand. Some do. Some of the more intelligent, the somatic ones, know how to play it to look like they care. However, usually, like I said, there's usually that one person they will be themselves with, and they will just say these things. And it's their envy as such. However, it's their competitiveness. So no one's going to have suffered quite like they've suffered. No one's going to have had a childhood as bad as their childhood, and they will use their childhood as a justification for their behaviour. Yet with their double standards, you will not be allowed to use your childhood for anything. They'll be very judgmental towards other people, but no one's allowed to judge them. And there's plenty of people with terrible childhoods that grow up to try and improve and be better. And then there's narcissistic people who grow up to shame and blame and punish everybody else. And with the good news, again, because of their envy, try and share some good news with them and achievement with them. They'll either try to take the credit and say, oh, that's because I did that for you, or if I didn't help you, that's thanks to me, because they want the admiration for being there for you and helping you and supporting you. Or they'll turn around and say, oh, it's nothing compared to when I. And they'll use that on both. If you're suffering, that's nothing compared to when I. And if you've done something, that's nothing compared to when I. As they're just bringing the conversation back onto themselves. They feel like they're more important than you.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one thing that we talked about was something we wanted to do back in October with the haunting of the narcissist. But we missed the Halloween thing. But I was saying that sometimes I've seen older narcissists who feel what almost seems like regret. They feel haunted. Do you think that these people actually ever do feel guilty for what they've done? Like when they're alone and they don't have an audience anymore. Have you ever seen it?
I don't think they feel guilty about what they've done. I think they might feel that moment of shame. I don't think they feel guilty. I haven't seen, I have heard from a close person that they have witnessed a person with a lot of narcissistic traits sit there with their head in their hands, not really wanting to discuss, but wanting the attention for being down.
That makes sense.
But not wanting to talk about. And they were wondering if that was because they were starting to have some regrets. However, their regrets don't tend to be regrets of, oh, I wish I'd have spent more time with my children. I wish I'd have done more of this. I wish I'd have done more than that. It's more, oh, I wish they hadn't have witnessed me do this. Oh, I wish my children would have been there more for me. I wish my children would have appreciated me more. Why is everybody walked out on me?
I think that's what I saw. Because what you're saying, I'm like, yeah, that fits. Okay.
Yeah, they turn it straight back onto themselves and how it wasn't their fault. It was somebody else's wrongdoing.
But they're so sad about it.
Yes.
That's okay. That's the part that's
looking for that attention.
Okay. I think I fell for it. Well,
so
it's okay.
though.
All right. We just got a question. Can you talk about trauma bonding and its effects?
Trauma bonding has so many side effects. When you get to know somebody, you get to connect with them, and you get to connect with them on an emotional level. And with a narcissistic person, they are going to go all out to provoke feelings such as desire within you, a strong desire to be with them. They're going to mirror who you are as a person, and we can all mirror people just to build up that rapport, so you don't think it's anything out of the ordinary. However, they're literally selling you who you are as a person, claiming that that's them, so that they can future fake with you, so that they can claim that they want the same things as you. So you've got that sort of strong emotional connection, you've got that strong desire, and you don't want to let them down. And it's even more important that you don't let them down, because they're your dreams, they're your hopes too. So you know how important they are to you, so you don't want to let them down. Then you have things like the love languages, such as the giving of gifts and words of affirmation, which a narcissist will use in an abundance. Yet, because they are the love languages that we can all do, it's hard to recognize that a narcissistic person is using these to manipulate and exploit us. And then once they get us where they want us, is when they begin to devalue who we are as a person, compare us to other people, put us down, mock us, humiliate us. And then once they've got us to a point where we might think, this isn't right, something's not right, I need to leave. You still care about them because you've got that object constancy, so you still care whether there's arguments. So you're thinking, this isn't right, I need to leave. And you know you're thinking this. And they come along, you might even mention it to them, and they're going to come along with that intermittent reinforcement, and they're going to breadcrumb you back into the relationship. They're going to offer you all the things that they promised to do for you. They're going to suddenly start doing them. So you think, oh, maybe it was me then. Because they will be blaming you at the same time. Oh, well, if you hadn't have done this, then I'd have done that. So as soon as you step up your game to please them, they'll do that for you. Then once they've got you back there again, they start to devalue you again. So you're in that turmoil of emotional roller coaster. The stress that they cause releases so many different chemicals, such as cortisol, which is addictive within itself. And that's what can also cause a lot of health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then the highs of the relationship, when they're treating you well, when you're in that love bombing, when you're in that intermittent reinforcement, creates the dopamine. So you're on your body's own natural drugs of highs and lows, which creates that sort of trauma bond. There's other things such as Stockholm syndrome and falling into their behavior trying to protect yourself. However, with the trauma bond, you then become chemically addicted to that pattern of behavior. You've been conditioned as well into living in that kind of lifestyle. So if you've had a traumatic relationship with a narcissistic person and then you meet a non-narcissistic person who treats you well, it can then be, well, where's the conflict? Where's the disagreements? Where's the, even though you can be having those little disagreements, but healthy disagreements, healthy debates, it can be more like, well, this doesn't, because you're no longer getting that emotional hit.
Right, it's
and
boring.
when it comes to breaking free from the trauma bond, you have to have a strong enough desire for something else to give you that dopamine hit. So it's just like building a new career. It tends to not go smoothly. You're going to have those moments in your life where it's going to be stressful and it's not going to work out, and that's going to give you that cortisol hit. And then you're going to have those moments where you're winning and you're getting in. Yes, in any sort of thing. Even if you're just learning if you never played an instrument and you're learning to play a piano, you're going to have days where you're going to suck and then days where it's going to go great. And it's going to give you those hits, but in a healthy way. So to lose the trauma bond of a narcissist, you've got to have a strong enough desire for something different that's going to give you a positive outlook in life, something to aim for, something to make you want to get out of bed in the morning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the conversation in the background. Let me just tell them. Grace, can you guys lower your voice a little bit? Sorry, I'm almost done. Okay. This is the router getting repaired. But anyway, yeah, I was a little bit distracted during the last part of your answer. Sorry about that. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I kept thinking about how people will sometimes say, well, why didn't you leave sooner? Because of this addiction, because your brain, the intermittent reinforcement and the dopamine. And then I also was thinking about how when you do come out of these narcissistic relationships, it does tend to be boring. Like a healthy relationship can feel boring and like something's wrong because you're not used to that, because your brain has been conditioned to this emotional roller coaster.
Usually you don't even recognize that you're in it at the time. And they get you to act in certain ways that are very similar to them. So you think you're the abusive one. They can provoke you and wind you and get you going until you start shouting at them and raging out at them. And because you take responsibility, you're the one that's thinking, oh, if only I hadn't have done that, then they would have done this.
Right. What can I do better?
Yeah.
What can I do better? I remember feeling like a desire to stay in the relationship with my body, with my like whatever chemicals were going on, but like thinking about it, there was nothing that I really wanted anymore, but still feeling drawn to keep it going.
Yeah, you're trying to get that. You're forever chasing those good times that aren't actually real as such. They're an illusion that the narcissist has sold, a false belief of who they are to pull you into the relationship. So you're forever chasing after those desires that you created in the beginning. And even when you can sort of recognize that it's not going to happen with this person, but this person wanted these things too. So you don't want to let them down either because you care about them, yet you need to get away from them. Plus there's things like financial abuse and being isolated from people. There's so many reasons why people don't leave, and often they just don't see what they're in until they're out. And fear, narcissistic people will plant so much fear into you that you don't leave. They'll take a photo of you asleep naked, and if you do that, then I'm going to show everybody this. They'll film without you knowing, and then use it against you to threaten you. When realistically, that shows that they're the manipulative one. However, when you're in it, you're that full of fear, you daren't step away.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what you said about the illusion, like they sold you an illusion. So from the beginning, there was never any wonderful things going on, but you thought there were. Like you thought you had the same goals and dreams and beliefs. You thought it was your soulmate. So you're committed to staying with that person, thinking it's not going to get any better than this because I've met someone who I have all this in common with. But it's just a lie. It was always a lie from the beginning. That's really hard to accept, especially when people are getting out of these relationships, because it's like, I can't believe I spent 20 years with someone that never really loved me. Like, how could I have believed this for so long? It's really difficult.
It's extremely difficult to recognize that the person you were with, they weren't actually with you. And with some narcissistic people, because they're working on their own fantasies, they can meet you and the things that you would like can seem a good idea to them. However, it's not a strong enough desire for them. It's not what they want. They're borrowing your dreams. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, they can be really hyped up and really, yes, this sounds like an amazing plan. And it might sound like an amazing plan for them and they might want it. However, they don't want to put the work in. They want you to just make it happen for them. And when it doesn't happen, that's your fault. You're the one that ruined it all. You're the one that didn't achieve it. You're the one that didn't do it. Which goes back to their regrets in some ways. When they're older and they have those regrets, it's not that they regret leaving you or doing something to you. They regret leaving you if they're not getting what they want, but they regret the fact that you didn't supply it to them, that they chose the wrong person. Then they'll never choose the right person as such, because they're not willing to put the equal share in, the equal workload in. They're not willing to go through the challenging times with you. They're just going to blame you for the challenging times. So when you're kind of at that standpoint of, well, we do have ups and downs, relationships do have their ups and downs, which they do, but not to the extent that a narcissistic person will put you through. So we all have those points where one of you might be putting 20% effort in because you're that drained over something else, or you've lost a loved one, or something's going off, so you're only putting that 20% of effort in. And then your partner is then supposed to be the one that puts the 80% effort in. Whereas a narcissistic person will then just go and look elsewhere because you're not giving them the attention. And then at some point that swings back round and you're the one that's putting the 80% effort in because your partner's going through something and they've only got 20% to give to the relationship. But you're going to give them the help and the support that they need until they're back on the feet. And then it goes to that 50-50, you know. It shifts, the balance shifts all the time. However, with a narcissistic person, they want to put the bare minimum effort in and you to constantly put the maximum effort in. And whenever you're going through something, if you're not there for them, they're going to go and find someone who is there for them, which is why in their mind, you can often find them to turn around and blame you. If they, back to the affairs, if they have an affair on you and get caught out cheating, they'll turn around to you and say, that's because you weren't giving me enough attention.
Right, and then you feel bad.
Yeah.
And apologize.
And in their mind, they actually think, well, if you'd have just given me all the attention, I wouldn't have had to have cheated on you, so therefore it's your fault. While you're just stood there sort of dumbfounded thinking, what? Like,
right?
But
believing it.
Person can go and have a child with somebody else and blame their current partner for having a child that they didn't want. And but in their head, they actually believe that. And you're stood there thinking, well, that's not quite how it works.
Right. But often their voice is louder than yours in your head.
Your head's smashed. Your head's been scrambled by them. And they believe. I think that is another thing. As they do believe they're right, they will stand to their point and they sound very convincing. And that that usually gives them the confidence. As they've got that confidence, in general, we tend to look up to more confident people. However, with confident people, they will recognize their mistakes, and they might not be confident on the inside. They'll just put it on the outside, but they'll admit fault. They'll try and help other people. They'll try and support other people. With arrogant people, like narcissistic people, they're going to pull you down. They're going to tear you to shreds. However, their arrogance comes across as confidence. So we stand there believing their lies because we believe it's their confidence, when it's not. They're just manipulating us to get what they want.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the confidence, looking up to someone who's confident, it's such a dichotomy, because they seem so confident, and a victim of narcissistic abuse has lost all their confidence. And one of the most important things that I think we both do is we help people regain their confidence, like relearn who they were, because they are just like a shard of who they used to be. And they forget that they were a whole person because they've been decimated by this kind of emotional abuse. And again, people who don't have experience with it can't fathom that this goes on. And that's why a lot of times people say that narcissistic or emotional abuse is worse than physical abuse, because the wounds are invisible, so you don't get the sympathy and the help that you need, because people don't take it as seriously.
They kind of convince you. Some will damage property, and then they turn around and say, well, at least I didn't hit you. Like, you're supposed to be grateful that they didn't hit you. And some, even with the physical, they find a way to blame you. A lot of narcissistic types will go for non-fatal strangulation. If you're persisting at something, if you're standing in your truth and that persistent at something, they'll go through many different manipulative ways to get you to quieten down. And if you don't, they lose it. And then they'll stand there and say, look what you made me do. You made me angry. And you're thinking, well, yeah, if I hadn't have pushed it, then maybe they wouldn't have done that. Oh, that was my fault. But if you go back to the actual beginning of it, no, that was them. They lied and they refused to take responsibility.
And the symbolic nature of strangulation, it's like to cut off your voice. Yeah. So I just was looking at time, like, Elizabeth, we've been on for almost an hour.
Going to get ready for the school run.
You gotta go. But thank you so much for talking. Can you tell people how they can find you? I'm sure we could have many more conversations.
Thank you.
But we gotta go.
Well, I am on Instagram as Coach Elizabeth Shaw. I'm over on YouTube as Understanding Narcissism, and the same on Facebook.
Understanding Narcissism. And I realize you're not on TikTok, are you?
Yes, I am. I thought I followed you on TikTok. I'm sure I follow you on TikTok.
Okay, because I did Coach Elizabeth Shaw, and there's another Elizabeth Shaw that's not you.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, there's quite a few Shaws that's not me. Well, I didn't realise there was one on TikTok.
All right, I'm gonna look again.
Right, I'm sure I follow you on TikTok. I'm gonna go and check that out now.
Yeah, me too. Sure. Okay, so so you're everywhere, and very easy to find. But you're 5 hours ahead of us. So our people are maybe just getting up, and you're in your afternoon already.
Yeah, that's why I tend to post first thing in the morning for those going to bed, and last thing randomly throughout the day to cover everybody. Yeah, well, everybody catches up. But thank you so much for all the excellent content that you put out there. I mean, it's definitely helped me these past few years. Thank you for all of yours as well. Oh, you're welcome. All right, so we'll stay in touch and talk again. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bye. Bye. Bye.